Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Wendy Nichols and the Platform Party.
When are we going to ask them to settle down? Good morning, colleagues. Can you settle down so we can start the debates today? I understand it's quite heavily raining outside, so hopefully it doesn't come through the roof that it normally does when we're in Brighton. But, and my Unison colleagues will vouch for that as well. It's not good that they're sat on the front row either. Okay, thank you. We'll start today's session. Just welcome to you all to conference. And the first part of the agenda today is that I'd like to welcome the chair of the CAC, Harry Donaldson. Thank you, Harry.
Morning, Conference. Formally present CAC Report 2. Since the production of the report, the CAC have been notified that Sina Larry wishes to withdraw from the ballot for National Auditors. Therefore, the ballot timetable for today is cancelled, and Chris Kitchen and John Park are elected unopposed as National Auditors. CAC 2 report contains the full results of the priorities ballot conducted yesterday and announced at the end of the afternoon session. These are contained in Appendix 1 of page 24. Following compensating meetings on the agreed subject areas of child refugees, grammar schools, housing, NHS, employment rights, defend and promote public services, and energy and industrial strategy, 11 composite motions were agreed, and these are detailed on pages 9 to 23 of CAC 2 and will be timetabled for debate. The 3 agreed composite motions on employment rights and the composite motion on industrial strategy will be debated today during the economy debate. The 2 agreed composite motions on defend and promote public services will be debated this afternoon during the economy debate. The CAC wishes to thank the representatives of Disability Labour who came to meet with the CAC yesterday. The CAC is committed to ensuring that conference experience is positive for all who attend and was concerned to learn of the issues faced by some delegates with disabilities, many of which have now been addressed by the conference team, for example, extra seating in the bridge area and the rest area, and some minor adjustments on conference floor at this point. Colleagues, I would like to draw to conference's attention, space is limited on the floor of conference, and so the CAC would request that people refrain from standing on conference floor to make accessibility much easier for disabled colleagues. Conference will adjourn at 4 p.m. to seminars which will take place in the ACC. The full details of seminar sessions are detailed on pages 8 of CAC 2 report. Conference, I move CAC Report 2.
Thank you, Harry. Delegates, are there any questions of the CAC report? And note what I'm saying, questions and not speeches. There's a guy over there holding the paper and one behind.
Comrades, Max Shan, a young Labour. I spoke to the conference for the first time yesterday about the decision to take all the NEC rule changes as one vote. We were told by the CAC that this decision was taken by the NEC. I've now spoken to members of the NEC who informed me that no such decision was taken by that committee. This begs the question as to who made the decision and what authority did they have in the first place. These kinds of changes are important, conference. If they are made without any sort of democratic oversight, either by the NEC or this
Delegate,
conference...
can I remind you, I think the question is who made the decision on the report yesterday. I think we've got that. Can you get to the question, please?
I am getting to the question.
Right, well, please do.
I am getting to the question. I do apologise. But if this is made without any oversight by the NEC or by a conference, then it makes a mockery of what this movement stands for. So I'd like to move reference back again to actually get an answer, because I think it's about time we were told.
Delegate, next speaker.
Good morning, Conference. Martin Tolman, Meriden CLP, a first-time delegate, although you probably realise not necessarily entirely new to the Labour and trade union movement. Actually, moving a point of order, really. Both yesterday and today, we've seen the chair of the CAC move the CA report, and then several delegates have raised issues of concern, and I won't go through those, there's no need. Obviously, we've had one this morning. And the difficulty we have is that the chair of the CAC then asks us to vote either for or against the CAC report in its entirety, when actually I'm sure, like me, you would want to generally accept the report, but would actually want to vote specifically to support or not support the particular points the delegate has actually made. The chair, in his report yesterday, was very honest and actually said this process of having what I would call, to be quite honest, is not necessarily the only thing in the Labour Party that's like this, a take it or leave it approach to the report, has actually been custom.
Delegate,
sorry,
I really don't,
okay.
no, I really don't want to be difficult, but can you just ask the question?
So the question
and then Harry
I'm asking,
yes.
question I'm asking and would like to see conference support for is, can we please go back to the previous tried and tested way of actually, when somebody moves reference back, the vote that we take on conference floor is specifically on the issue that's being raised by the comrades and not on the report as a whole.
Thank you. Catherine Cooper, Sherwood CLP. This is a brief one. I went to a drinks reception last night. There was free wine, so I stayed a while. Was chatting to the people serving the drinks and found out that they are paid minimum wage. They were very quick to point out that they are employed via an agency by the venue because they didn't want to get into any trouble. But I think this is a very important point. We are the Labour Party. We should be setting the example. If you work at conference, you should be getting a living wage. Whoever you are employed by... Whoever you are employed by, I hope that you are as embarrassed and shocked as I was last night, and I hope that you'll join me in asking the Conference Arrangements Committee to please investigate this as a matter of urgency.
Delegate. There are no further questions. Harry, would you like to respond? Thank you.
Thank you. Just to the last delegate, I'd just like to say thank you very much for bringing that to our attention, and the request to investigate it will be done, and if there's a requirement there to meet with the CAC or myself, we'd be happy to go through the details of that and get some further detail, but we will investigate that on your behalf. Thank you. In regards to our colleague from the previous speaker, Martin, the issue was, as far as our knowledge goes, that's the proposal they put forward there, has never been done in the last 20 years, so therefore we will not be going back to that situation. With regards to Matt, again, I'd just like to clarify the point that conference accepted CAC 1 yesterday, it was voted on, and today we are voting on CAC 2 report. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Okay, with that explanation from Harry, I understand that the report has never been taken one item at a time, and for longer than most of us can remember, I understand, around that. You've heard Harry's explanation that we voted on CAC report 1 yesterday. We are now voting on CAC report number 2 today. So can I see all those in favour of SEA? Yeah.
See him again.
I'm in the middle of a vote, aren't I? Okay, yeah.
Conference, me again. I apologise. I don't mean to be a bother, but can we have a card vote, please?
No.
No. We're moving on.
Okay, I did actually start the vote in any case before the point of order. I'm going to proceed to the vote on CAC report number 2. Can I see all those in favour of accepting CAC report 2? Thank you. And all those against? That is carried. No. Come on, be fair. We're eating into time. Please, don't shout at me. That's not acceptable in this party. Let's carry on. Thank you, Harry. Thank you. No, I'm moving on to the debate. And we now move on to the international debate. Our first business this morning is the International Policy Commission report on pages 36 to 41 of the National Policy Forum. Report and Priorities Issues document on pages 92 to 100. To move the annual report of the Policy Commission, can I call on Kath Spate from the NEC? Thanks, Kath.
Thanks, Wendy. At conference, I formally move the National Policy Forum annual report from the International Policy Commission and the Commission's priority issue document on Britain's defence and security priorities. The Commission is responsible for developing Labour Party policy on foreign affairs, international development and defence. So, needless to say, we've had a very busy year. Violence and instability across much of the Middle East, devastating terrorist attacks around the world, a dramatic growth in the number of refugees seeking safety, and then, of course, the vote to leave the European Union, which has created such profound uncertainty. Each of those challenges remind us that Britain cannot meet the challenges of the modern world alone. Conference, Labour has always been an internationalist party. Our instincts for social justice, for solidarity, equality, human rights and the rule of law at home have shaped the way we engage with the world. Whether it is Ernie Bevin's central role in building NATO, or the last Labour government's interventions to stop ethnic cleansing in Kosovo and protect the stability in Sierra Leone, or our creation of DFID and our long-standing commitments to overseas aid and tackling climate change. Conference, Labour governments have more often than not been a massive force for good around the world. Now it is clear that the nature of some of the challenges we face today is changing. Conference, we must not be complacent. Many of the so-called old or traditional threats persist. Armed conflict, between and within states, nuclear proliferation, and even, in the case of Russia's land-grabbing Crimea, annexation of territory. So we must adapt to meet new challenges, but we must also be realistic about the hard security threats that we and our allies face. Conference, Tory cuts since 2010 have weakened and demoralised our armed forces, leaving them poorly equipped, overstretched and underpaid. The Tories' abandonment of Labour's defence industrial strategy means that many of our new military ships and vehicles are being built using mainly imported steel. Under this government and out of Europe, Britain's security and our international standing are being undermined. In this context, it's in this context that the Commission was asked to consider Britain's defence and security priorities. We met 6 times between March and July and took evidence from a wide array of organisations and affiliates, from CND and Medicat to Rolls-Royce and Airbus, from GMB and Unite to Scientists for Global Responsibility, not to mention all the CLPs and members from across the country who contributed. And I'm extremely grateful to all those who took time to share their views. I also want to thank all the Commission members and especially our party officer, Frances Grove-White. Finally, I would also like to welcome all the international delegation to conference. You are most welcome. Conference, these are turbulent and challenging times. And once again, it is up to us to show that it is Labour who have the solutions. I move.
Thanks, Kath. Thank you. I now call on Glenis Wilmot, the leader of the European Parliamentary Labour Party, to address us. Thank you, Glenis.
Good morning, Conference. Obviously, this isn't the speech I wanted to make to you today, and believe me, this is one of the most difficult conference speeches I've ever had to make. Some of you may remember that a year ago I warned this conference about what a post-Brexit Britain could look like after a leave vote in the referendum. I described a Britain left perilous at the mercy of free marketeers looking to dismantle our social and working rights, all in the name of cutting red tape and bureaucracy. And I described a model of Britain as a free trade, low tax, poorly regulated country where the rich are encouraged to be greedy and the poor should just be grateful. Well, sadly, that nightmare scenario is coming true. And we must all now come to terms with the referendum result and wake up to the perils facing us. But Conference, before I talk about our response, I want to start by thanking all of those Labour activists up and down the country who campaigned hard for Britain to remain in the European Union. I also want to thank party staff nationally and around the regions who worked tirelessly during the campaign. And I want to thank the vast majority of our colleagues in the trade unions who supported us unreservedly in our efforts to ensure a Remain vote. Thank you. Finally, I want to use this moment to pay tribute to the work of my colleagues, Labour as MEPs. They've achieved many great things over the years, and I've seen firsthand how they've committed their lives to bring better rights, better jobs and better opportunities for British people. And while the clock may be now ticking on Britain's involvement in the European Parliament, what is certain is that the efforts and energy of Labour's MEPs in Brussels over the years should be acknowledged and greatly appreciated. And in a way, this fits with what I want to talk about this morning. The effort, energy and commitment shown during the referendum campaign shouldn't be in vain. We cannot and we should not just accept that because we lost the referendum, our voices must be silent. We believe Britain should be a progressive partner in Europe, working with others to build a better country, a better continent, a better world. So now more than ever, it's important that we unleash our passion, find our spirit and work together to represent not just the 48% who voted to remain, but all those people whose future is reliant on living and working in an outward-looking country with a progressive approach to finding its place in a role in a globalised world. And we must start by holding all those Leave campaigners to account. Everything they said, everything they promised during the referendum campaign cannot and should not be forgotten. We must continue to hold them to their word, continue to point out the outright lies that were told, not because we want to reverse the result of the referendum, but because if we allow this type of populist, divisive, jingoistic politics to remain unopposed, then our vision for a fair, progressive, kinder society will continue to be a long way from reality. Now, I know in some cases this may be difficult, as once the results came in, most of the Leavers went into hiding. For all their desire to take back control, when the opportunity came for them to actually take control, they lost their nerve, lost their bottle, and conveniently lost their memories. Do you remember those promises? 350 million a week to the NHS, more investment in public services and British industry, the end of freedom of movement, but with continued access to Europe's markets, markets that are vital for British jobs. No wonder they've vanished faster than Usain Bolt can run the 100 metres. Nigel Farage grew a moustache, possibly in a vain attempt to disguise himself. Didn't work. Michael Gove and Andrea Leadsom were in and out like the hokey cokey, while Boris Johnson is continuing with his Walter Mitty-like life by travelling the world pretending to be a diplomat. But we can't let them get away with it. They may have retreated to the comfort of a Donald Trump rally, or may now disown every claim they ever made. But beware, they're still around, they haven't gone away, and these people have no shame. Conference, believe me, as soon as the difficult job is done, they'll crawl back out of the woodwork and try to tap into the inevitable disappointment of Brexit reality. No doubt blaming the establishment for ignoring the referendum result, knowing full well their lies and promises were always unachievable. So we must be ready at every turn. Remember what they told us and expose what they said. Conference, the job at hand is both immense and intimidating. And as a movement, we will have to fight as hard as we've ever fought to stop a neoliberal vision for Britain that would leave our country even more divided than today. So we shouldn't be shy about it. We shouldn't be scared. If the Tory Brexit deal with the EU is not right, we must fight it. We shouldn't accept a deal that doesn't guarantee our social and working rights. We shouldn't accept a deal that doesn't have our environmental protections, and we shouldn't accept a deal that will hit jobs, lower standards and wages. And we shouldn't accept a deal that opens up our public services and the NHS to profit over people. Many in this room were deeply concerned about the implications of the TTIP trade deal. You may think that after the EU vote, for us in Britain, TTIP is as good as dead. But now the Frankenstein monster that is the new Department for International Trade is beginning to rise, as the doctor himself, Liam Fox, is given free rein to revive a Thatcher-style Britain by travelling the world, offering up our resources to the highest bidder. And I fear whatever Fox comes back with will make our fight on TTIP feel like a walk in the park. Conference, what has happened, and the future of our country remains uncertain. But no matter how bruised we feel, no matter how disconsolate we are, or how fearful we may be, the next steps this country takes could be catastrophic for many people. Now, I don't know about you, but I didn't spend my life fighting for a better Britain just to give up now. And I don't know what happens next. But I do know this. If we can't get our act together, if we can't find our feet, if we can't find our passion, then our nightmares will soon be a reality. Now, more than ever, Britain needs Labour. Labour, let's not let Britain down.
Thank you, Glenys, and as always, an inspirational speech in very difficult circumstances, but I'm sure we all know that Glenys and the rest of our MEPs will continue to fight for what's right for us in this country. Thanks, Glenys. Delegates, can I now call on the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry, to address conference. Thank you, Emily.
Conference. I'm so proud to stand here today in Liverpool, or should I say Labour Liverpool, a loyal member of Labour's shadow cabinet in what is now again Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. And I'm so proud to have such a magnificent team working with me. Barry Gardner, Catherine West, Ray Collins and Diane Hayter. Let me thank them for their extraordinary hard work and commitment, and for the fact that they've stepped up in the last few months when times have been really difficult. And let me also take the opportunity to thank Glenys Wilmot, and all our MEPs for their commitment to the European project and for their diligence, work that has far too often not been properly recognised, and who in the next couple of years we will be relying on more than ever as we leave the European Union. So thank you, Glenys. So as many of you know, Jeremy Corbyn and I share have a constituency boundary, and we have had for over a decade now. As a 20-year-old, he hitchhiked to London in the cab of a lorry, and he saw a street off the A1 called Ronald's Road, and he liked the name, so he got out there. And almost 50 years later, he's still there. He's the MP for Islington North and the MP for Ronald's Road. And when I was selected for the neighbouring seat in 2005, we were behind the Liberals in every poll. And on election day, without being asked by anyone, Jeremy left his own constituency and went round by himself, knocking on doors in what was to be my constituency, telling voters, I know you disagree with Iraq, and so did I, and so did Emily, and we were on the marches together. You have got to get out and you've got to vote Labour. And we won by 484 votes. So thank you, Jeremy. I've got to know Jeremy very well since then. There are many words that sum him up: kindness, generosity, courage. But there's one, I believe, above all, and that word is integrity. From the constituency he represents in Ronald's Road to the Labour members he represents throughout this country, he is someone we believe in, and he is someone that we trust to stand up for us and to speak up for us, and that's why we vote for him, and that's why I'm proud to serve in the Shadow Cabinet. And compare that with David Cameron. Where is his integrity? The man who voted against the EU referendum in 2011 and then chickened out once he thought that he'd lose seats to UKIP. The man who went to Brussels and came back with nothing and then tried to con the British people that he'd solved all their problems. The man who chose to make the referendum campaign all about him and then campaigned that other parties weren't doing enough. The man who couldn't persuade 2/3 of his own voters and 1/4 of his own cabinet to vote Remain, and then complained that it was all Labour's fault. The man who said how proud he was to serve his country and then immediately quit as Prime Minister, quit as an MP, and then left everyone else to clear up the mess. And conference, make no mistake, this country has been led into a dark wood by a Tory party playing internal power games. They have no plan on how to get us out again. It was a Tory-chaired Foreign Affairs Committee who examined the deliberate decision made by David Cameron that the government should not plan for the possibility of a leave vote. And the committee said that this amounted to gross negligence. But the Tories have now had 3 months since then, and they still have no plan. And they've gone from gross negligence to rank incompetence. And why? Because Boris Johnson and David Davis and Liam Fox are all more interested in fighting over job titles and office space than they are on dealing with the issues. And the worst of it is, we now know that they didn't even mean to win. Alan Duncan, Boris Johnson's deputy at the Foreign Office, says Boris's wish was to lose by 1, so that he could be the heir apparent without ever having to clear up the mess. Playing games with the future of our country and the future of our children just to bolster his own career, I ask you, conference, where is the integrity in that? But conference, Britain is a strong and we are a resourceful and resilient country. And working together, we will find a way through these problems. But we need a strong and united Labour Party to play our part in helping our country through. We cannot turn the clock back and run the Brexit vote again. We have been given our instructions by the British people and we have to act on them. But that does not mean letting the Tory party go into a locked room and take all the decisions by themselves over the future of our country and the future of our children without any debate, discussion or explanation. We will not allow that to happen. We will stand up to the Tories on behalf of the communities we represent, and we will demand to be heard. We will stand up for the EU migrants currently living in Britain and demand that their continued right to do so is guaranteed. We will stand up for UK businesses who depend on trade with Europe and demand that they can continue doing so freely. And conference, we will stand up for workers' rights, for deprived regions, for environmental protection, for small farm businesses, for human rights. For every area where the Tories will look to wield the axe after Brexit, we will stand in their way. And we will demand that the rights and investments on which our communities depend are protected even after we leave the EU. Now, the Tories will say that they're just cutting red tape and eliminating waste. But we know the truth. We know the truth. When they say red tape, we say equal pay. When they say red tape, we say clean beaches. When they say red tape, we say disabled access. And when they say waste, we say no. We say it's Erasmus exchanges, it's the Albert Dock, it's peace projects in Northern Ireland. We have a fight ahead to defend our rights and investment. And the unions, regional government, NGOs, students, the entire Labour movement, we must all take our place in that fight. And today, we're going to take a lead. For the period 2014 to 2020, the UK was allocated €10.8 billion in structural funding for our most deprived regions and communities. Now, the Tories have given an undertaking hedged around with conditions that funding up to 2020 will be protected. For the period after that, they've said nothing. Now, that is not good enough. That is not good enough. Without long-term certainty over funding, our regions and communities cannot plan ahead. They cannot attract other investment, and they cannot make progress. So thanks to John MacDonald, Labour's shadow Chancellor, we can guarantee that a future Labour government will make up any shortfall in structural funding into the 2020s and beyond. And the same will go for the funding of peace and reconciliation projects in Northern Ireland. The people who stand to lose out most from Brexit must be looked after first. And that is what we shall do. But conference, there is something else that we must stand up for in the wake of Brexit, especially at a time of great global uncertainty, with the expansionism of Russia, with financial troubles in China, with the ever-widening conflict in Syria, and with polarized elections in America, France, and Germany. We must stand up for the kind of Britain we want to see. A Britain that faces outwards into the world and doesn't turn in on itself. A Britain that tears down walls rather than building them. A Britain that is a genuine global leader and actively works to build the kind of world that we can feel proud to hand on to our children. Now that means putting human rights at the heart of foreign policy, not like the Tories promising to scrap the Human Rights Act. That means redoubling our efforts to tackle climate change, not like Theresa May abolishing the department responsible. That means treating Syrian refugees like the human beings that they are, not like David Cameron describing them as a swarm. That means giving overseas aid to those who need it most, not like Priti Patel using it as leverage in trade deals. This summer, I saw for myself how Britain can show true leadership in the world. I went with my husband and our younger children to visit our eldest son, who was working in Rwanda, to provide support for the government in Kigali, with funding from the Department of International Development. My kids have given me some pretty proud moments over the years, but to see my son working so hard to build greater prosperity in Rwanda was definitely one of the proudest. And it also made me think, just 20 years ago, Rwanda was a byword for hopelessness, for tragedy, for the idea that there are some problems in some places that we can never fix. But the lesson of Rwanda since those dark days is that the goodwill and good faith, anything is possible, and no situation is too bleak to overcome. And for many years, with the strong support of the trade union movement in Britain, our brothers and sisters in the union movement in Colombia have worked for peace, democracy, and human rights, and they have paid a terrible price for their courage, but they never gave up. And now, for the first time in decades, thanks to their efforts, there is a real chance for lasting peace in that country. And so when we look at Rwanda, when we look at Colombia, when we look here at home in Northern Ireland, never let anyone say it's all too difficult and that nothing can be done. In Israel and Palestine, there are enough progressive people on all sides to shift the debate away from the extreme and entrenched positions towards a lasting peace. And in South Sudan, in Libya, in Yemen, even in Syria, however far away it seems now, peace is not impossible. But it will never be achieved. Peace is never achieved by dropping bombs from 30,000 feet. In Yemen, there are more than 1 million children facing starvation today. Cluster bombs have been dropped in such volumes in civilian areas that the locals say that they're hanging off the trees. Young children herding goats are picking up those bombs and thinking that they're toys, with all too familiar and tragic results. Conference, it cannot be right that when faced with a conflict like that, the UK's primary diplomatic involvement is selling planes and weapons to the Saudi-led side with no guarantees that they won't be used against civilians. There is no integrity in that. This summer marked 11 years since the passing of Robin Cook. Now, there was someone who believed that integrity and not opportunism should guide our overseas. And it was tragic that he didn't live to see the Chilcot report and the vindication that that gave him. In his resignation speech, Robin Cook said in a few hundred words what Chilcot said 13 years later in 2 million. But Robin's true vindication will only come not from reports into the acts of British governments, but when British governments themselves start to act differently. Now, we know from Yemen that we're a long way from an ethical foreign policy when it comes to the sale of arms. We know from Libya that lessons have not been learned when it comes to the planning for the aftermath of interventions and ensuring that war is always the last resort. But I believe that a Labour government under Jeremy's leadership will show that those lessons have been learned, and will show that an ethical foreign policy is not a pipe dream. And we will lead by example on all the major challenges that face the world. And there's one area where we can, and we must, seize the global leadership role. It was almost 60 years ago that a Labour Shadow Foreign Secretary demanded that when it came to negotiations over nuclear weapons, he would not be sent naked into the conference chamber. But what people forget was what Nye Bevan said beforehand in that famous speech. He said, "It's not a question of who's in favour of the bomb, but it is what is the most effective way of getting the damn thing destroyed. It is the most difficult of all the problems facing mankind." So what would Bevan think of the fact that 6 decades on, we are now further than ever from solving that problem, and that the conference chamber that he spoke of lies empty and silent? We all know how irresponsible it would be to ignore the problem of climate change and allow it to get worse and leave our children and grandchildren to worry about the consequences. So why don't we say the same about nuclear weapons, which have the power to destroy the world we live in minutes, not just over decades? So a future Labour government will not just revive talks on multilateral nuclear disarmament among the world's great powers, we will make the success of those talks the test of the success of our foreign policy. Global leadership on the biggest challenges the world faces. A Britain facing outwards and holding its head up high. A Labour Party led with integrity, a force for good in the world, determined to leave it a better, more peaceful, more prosperous place. That is our mission. That is our duty. That is the inheritance that our children deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for that speech. Can I now call on our next speaker, the Shadow Secretary of State for International Development, Kate Ossamer. Thank you, Kate.
Good morning, Conference. I want to take this opportunity to welcome our leader, Jeremy Corbyn. It is an honour for this girl from Tottenham to stand here today as your party's Shadow Secretary for International Development. You know, if you stand at the highest point in Tottenham, you can see as far as Haringey Town Hall. On a really clear day, you might just see a glimpse of Hackney. But thankfully, Labour's international vision reaches far wider than what I could see when I was growing up in North London. And it was a world where I discovered that there were people like us, international socialists, people who shared a common belief that together we can make this world a better place. That was a founding principle the creators of our party instilled and still resonates today. And that is why I say to you today, without hesitation, the Labour Party, our party, is the only truly internationalist party in British politics. It was the principles of the Labour Party and the trade union movement that did not stand idly by whilst the children of Soweto were massacred. It was our movement that stood alongside the ANC in the fight against apartheid. And it was a Labour government putting into practice Labour values that delivered the aid and expertise in the aftermath of the devastating 2004 tsunami in Southeast Asia. Today, the values of our party stand in stark contrast to those of the present government. Marching along the corridors of her new Whitehall department, the new Secretary of State for International Development wants to break the humanitarian consensus held by successive governments, a consensus that has helped millions of the most needy around the world for over 2 decades. Priti Patel, the new Development Secretary, has said she wants to bring Tory values to the UK aid programme. I know, it sounds like a bad pitch for a Channel 5 reality show. I can see it now. UK aid being overseen by Philip Green as Ambassador for Ethical Commerce. And Mike Ashley, Special Advisor for Equality and Workers' Rights. Look, the Tories have never been a fan of international aid. Priti Patel even once said that she wanted the department abolished. Labour will never abolish DFID. We will support it and we will expand it. We will help the people in the world who need us the most. No ifs, no buts. Labour is committed to 0.7% of GDP being ring-fenced and exclusively spent on aid. It's non-negotiable. Labour has shown what it can do when it's in government. The principles of aid for us are clear, helping people to live better lives. Take women's economic power. It is essential for sustainable development and achieving the targets set out in the Millennium Development Goals, the goals that Labour signed up to. Women make up more than 50% of the world's population, but 70% of women live in poverty. Women perform 66% of the world's work, produce 50% of the food, but earn 10% of the income. There is no policy for development more effective than giving women power. Two-thirds of the world's women cannot read or write. It was Gordon Brown who made the education of girls and young women a priority. Our aid budget should prioritise investing in education, giving every child the chance to shine. We should invest in health programmes, increasing the life expectancy of millions of the poorest. Good health enables people to live productive lives. Our agenda is to champion equality, end aid dependency and support self-sufficiency. Labour's vision is an international development department that fights inequalities by expanding freedoms and opportunities, helping people develop their own businesses, contributing to their own local economy. Development leading to independent lives. Aid is an investment in people that delivers real change. And let me be clear, unlike Priti Patel and the Tories, Labour will not turn the aid budget into a bargaining chip for human lives. Labour's values mean making difference globally. Providing aid is only a part of what Labour can do and will offer. For all the money we can use to help people out of poverty, we must also play a role in bringing justice. So a Labour government will be tough on corruption and tough on the receipts of corruption. Each year, billions of dollars are stolen from developing countries through tax evasion. It's larceny on a grand scale that undermines people's futures and the chance of governments to invest. The Tories continue to pay lip service to this issue, whilst doing very little to end it. We cannot call other countries fantastically corrupt when the proceeds of their corruption and tax dodging ends up in British tax havens such as the British Virgin Islands, Jersey and Guernsey. I pledge to you that Labour will tackle international tax evasion that takes the money out of the pockets of the world's poorest and puts it in the wallets of the world's wealthiest. Over the last 3 years, the world has watched in horror the nightly images of refugees fleeing wars. We are witnessing the largest mass exodus since the Second World War. And I would like to pay particular tribute to two Labour colleagues who've done so much to hold the Tories to account. Lord Alf Doves is the son of Jewish refugees who fled the Nazis, and he has worked tirelessly to hold the government to account. No, actually, he hasn't worked tirelessly. He has shamed the government by exposing their woefully inadequate response to unaccompanied children. Yvette Cooper has been a constant thorn in the side of Theresa May and the last Prime Minister. She has travelled to Calais on numerous occasions and has been a brilliant ambassador for Labour, and I thank them both. The solution to the refugee crisis lies in working with other partners across the world. We have to address the problem of human trafficking, especially of children. Tens of thousands of child refugees whose parents have been killed in conflict are being shuffled from camps in the Middle East and Europe. Their futures are on hold. Their lives are in limbo. We will abandon the double standards of the Tory approach that gives money to Yemen to build hospitals, while at the same time sells bombs to the Saudis to fire at those same hospitals which were built with UK aid. The Labour Party has a great record on backing development initiatives, which promotes freedom, fairness and equality. There are millions of people who have escaped poverty, helped by a radical, reforming Labour government that invested in education and health. There is a global lesson there. Labour's record on internationalism is unrivalled, and I will fight to keep that reputation for you and our great party. And I thank you.
Thank you, Kate. And I'm sure you all agree we've had 4 brilliant speeches from 4 brilliant women. Okay, we now will open the debate. Can I see people indicating who would like to speak? The guy over there with holding the green paper, I think. Yeah. The lady there. And the guy there, and I'll come back. I'll take 3 at a time, and I will come back round.
Conference, Amarjit Singh, representing the Communication Workers Union and speaking to the National Policy Forum report on international matters. Thank you. Conference, 5 years on from the Arab Spring, the dream has become a nightmare. The instability in the Middle East and North Africa has increased in the last decade. We have left countries like Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya in rubble. We as a country have not learned from our mistakes. We go into these unjust wars like raging bulls, sold on lies without any exit plans, leaving these countries without any stable governments. Conference, let's not forget that our previous governments have either helped to put some of these so-called rogue leaders in place or have supported them for many, many years. And when governments try to remove these leaders, they do not care how many innocent people die. We have seen the destruction in Syria And as a country, instead of supplying more aid, we are bombing and killing people. And when it comes to taking refugees, our government's response is that we will settle 20,000 Syrian refugees in the next 5 years. Where is the humanity, empathy this country was so proud of? Conference, we as an opposition party must make the government stop the bombing, send more aid and take our fair share of refugees. And when we, the Labour Party, get into government, we must change direction in these unjust wars and play a part in bringing stability into these regions and peace into the world. Thank you for listening.
Speaker.
Chair, Conference, Jackie Bailey, Member of the Scottish Parliament for Dumbarton, which is one of the 3 constituency seats we won last year. And believe it or not, I am a first-time delegate to Conference, right? But I am here for a specific reason, because I represent the constituency that covers Her Majesty's Naval Base Clyde, which is home to Trident. Contemporary motions on the future of Trident are missing from the conference agenda, and I understand instead we are to have a 2-year review. That follows a previous review that has just ended, and now we need another one. So in the interim, existing party policy stands. Conference, I believe in multilateral nuclear disarmament. Others want unilateral nuclear disarmament, and I respect that view. I want all nations to give up nuclear weapons because my ambition is nothing short of global zero. But I believe that where we disagree is the mechanism by which we achieve this. I want to inject a note of realism into the debate today because people expect maturity and responsibility from their politicians and from their political parties about the choices we make. They expect us to consider the consequences of our actions, and they are right to do so. So let me tell you about the economic realities of the base. It provides 11,300 jobs, 6,800 directly employed, a further 4,500 in the supply chain and local spend. That's 11,300 well-paid jobs in an area that struggles with higher than levels of unemployment in Western Bartonshire. Faslane is the biggest single-site employer in Scotland. It accounts for a quarter of the full-time workforce in my area. But you know, cancelling Trident just doesn't have an impact on Faslane. It has an impact on shipbuilding, on the Clyde, at Rosyth, and for thousands of jobs building the new submarines at Barrow. So whatever your view, please think very carefully. We have a responsibility for all of these workers and their families. Let me touch on defence diversification, because, you know, it doesn't work. That's not just my view. It's the view of Derek Torrey, Unite convener at the Faslane base. It's the view of Len McCluskey in an email to Derek Torrey as well. It's the view of many Labour armed forces ministers. We have tried defence diversification before. Tony Blair created a unit within government before. It failed, Conference. In closing, let me thank the GMB in Scotland and in the UK, and also thank Unite in the UK for their support of defence jobs. Conference, please don't give the workers at Faslane, at Barrow, at Rosyth, or on the Clyde lip service about jobs. Don't pretend and tell them that the number is somehow smaller, because they know the truth. Conference, defence workers deserve your support too.
Before the next speaker starts, can I see who else would like to speak in the debate? Got there, the second guy there, yeah. No, I've got too many men. The woman there, yeah, with the pink scarf, I think it is.
One's coming.
Sorry. Oh. I don't know. Where's the other one? Where shall I go? Anywhere I like. We'll go over here to this side as well. Yeah, the one in the pink tie. Is it pink? Thanks. Okay. Do you want to start?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Conference, Ken Curran, Unison. When the Department for International Development was established by Labour, its purpose was clear: to eliminate global poverty. And that was because Labour believes in a fairer world without poverty and inequality, where your opportunities in life don't depend on where you're born. And we recognise the fundamental role that quality public services should play in development by protecting the most vulnerable in society and reducing poverty and inequality. But the Conservative Party Conference has a very different development agenda. Since they took hold of DFID in 2010, they've promoted a poisonous ideology that prioritises privatisation over fighting poverty and funds big business over public services. You don't have to look far to see the damage that privatisation is doing to our own NHS as the Tory government hand over the health care of the nation piece by piece to their friends in the city. But sadly, and even more frightening, it's also an ideology that they are pushing on the poorest countries in the world. The Tory government has handed over millions to private consultants and contractors to jet around the world and hand over the healthcare of those nations, telling politicians to privatise the health systems in their countries. They're using our money, to fund an international public-private partnership department to encourage companies to encourage governments to give away their health budgets to multinational healthcare companies. They have pumped millions into private fee-paying hospitals targeting high-income groups in those countries. And they are cynically using the good name of our NHS to persuade the poorest countries in the world to change their laws and to leave the health needs of their populations to market forces. Conference, it is an absolute disgrace. And sadly, the record in education is just as bad. Rather than supporting quality public education, the Tory government is handing over the aid budget to companies to set up private low-fee schools all over Africa and India. Instead of being taught by teachers, for a few dollars a month, children in the poorest countries in the world can be taught by a person with next to no training, reading scripted lessons off a tablet in classes of 70 in a large tin shed. Not only have they been criticised by the United Nations, these DFID-supported schools are so bad that in Uganda, the education minister has just closed down 63 of them for poor education, poor sanitation and poor hygiene. And it's going to get worse now that Theresa May has appointed Priti Patel as the Minister for International Development. She is an advocate for the tobacco industry, who've caused such destruction around the globe. She's a minister who in the past has called for the introduction of the death penalty and the abolition of DFID, and she's now responsible for the UK's efforts to tackle global poverty. It's ridiculous. You've got to question the Prime Minister's judgment or her commitment to international development when she appoints a minister like that. Labour cannot and we will not let this Tory government hand the aid budget to big business friends.
Can you wind up?
I will do.
Thank you.
We will have a Labour agenda that will address these questions, and we must make sure we fight for that. Thank you, Conference.
Okay, next speaker. Stephen.
Conference. Richard Howitt, Member of the European Parliament for the East of England. Great to be on the platform with my friends Glenys and Clive and all of you, particularly because As some of you know, earlier this month I announced my decision to stand down from the European Parliament in November. And I want to use these few words to say thank you to you, Conference, and to this party. It has been an incredible privilege to serve you and to serve my constituency and to represent our country. A working class boy with a single parent mum from a Reading council estate who succeeded through comprehensive education. And the fact we have to refight those battles today shows the historic role our party must continue to play. In Europe, I've witnessed former communist countries get rid of their nuclear weapons and become our allies. I heard François Mitterrand, within weeks of his death, tell us that it was now for our generation to keep the peace in Europe. We voted in all of the labour rights in the social chapter into British law. We led the negotiations on climate change. And I took part in the secret peace talks in Havana, which will secure an end to a 30-year civil war in Colombia. We got Europe to sign up to a human rights convention for the first time, and for people with disabilities, which for me is a lifelong passion. And we did it all as Labour. It has been an honour to serve as part of the European Parliamentary Labour Party, Glenys. And in Europe, I've seen the rise of the far right, been in the Parliament chamber to hear Berlusconi call my German colleague a Nazi. I survived an aeroplane crash landing and was inside the lockdown as terrorists attacked Brussels. But what I remember most is the incredible friendship in the socialist group, proving that democratic socialist values truly are international. And now, Conference, we have to fight to protect that internationalism as part of British politics, to demonstrate to our European socialist colleagues that whilst our relationship might change, our common values won't. And as I go into a new international job, I promise you I will carry those same values into my own future, and to make clear that although I might be giving up those magic 3 letters after my name, I will never walk away from the Labour Party, and neither should anyone here. As a schoolboy, I remember watching on television as Jim Callaghan said to this conference that he was born in the Labour Party and he intended to die in it. And a generation later, I tell you the same.
Richard, in the spirit of fairness, you do need to finish, please.
I really am finishing. Conference, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Remember, always Labour.
Thank you, Conference. Stephen Kinnock, Labour MP for Aberavon, and believe it or not, this is my first time ever addressing Conference. All of us here know that on the 23rd of June, our future changed dramatically. Even those who campaign to remain in the EU must respect the vote of the British people. But the question facing us is how we, building on Britain's many strengths, can create a new future for ourselves now, both at home and abroad. A part of the answer that seems to have been forgotten is this: we cannot and will not do it alone. We will negotiate Brexit and new trade deals with other people and governments, not simply by ourselves. But the question is, will these negotiations be a fractious row, or will they be a productive partnership? The answer to that question will largely depend on how the rest of the world views us. And from that perspective, we've certainly got our work cut out for us. When Nigel Farage goes back to the EU to gloat, to collect his paycheck, and accuses MEPs of not having had careers, to see a Lithuanian MEP, a cardiac surgeon, putting his head into his hands, that should shame us. When the US State Department bursts out laughing as he hears Boris Johnson has been named Foreign Secretary by Theresa May, that shames us. When Liam Fox, a man forced to resign in disgrace as Defence Secretary for abusing his position for a friend's commercial gain, is appointed as International Trade Secretary, it shames us. When our new Secretary of State for International Development, Priti Patel, has made clear the department and our support for some of the hardest suffering communities in the world should be scrapped, that shames us. These things not only shame us, they also make it harder for us to build strong relationships and partnerships in the world. We must recognise that an inevitable consequence of the EU referendum result is that countries the world over think we're withdrawing from the international stage, that we're stepping back and becoming insular. The Conservatives have shown in their incompetence in preparing for Brexit and in the lack of humanity our country has shown towards Syria's refugees that they're unable to be outward-looking and build the relationships that our national interest demands. But we know that cooperating with others doesn't diminish our independence, it enhances it. Because in an uncertain and interdependent world, there truly is strength in numbers. In every aspect, building a new economy for the post-Brexit world, national security, tackling climate change, our success will be shaped both by us and by the strength of our partnerships around the world. As we in Labour prepare to set out our post-referendum agenda, our values of internationalism, solidarity, and partnership must be at the core of everything we do, showing the world that we value their friendship and that we're committed to doing our bit. Because we know that our true strength lies not in the closed fist, but in the open hand. Thank you.
We're running out of time. Just before the next speaker starts, we've time to take 2 more speakers, I think. Let me have a look. Yeah. Where? Straight to the one red and pink. Yeah. Yes, Hughes. Yes. Yes. No, too many men.
You've got to get a balance.
Good morning, Conference. Edie Fairservice, Croydon Central. I'm a first-time delegate here. I'm here today to talk about the greatest humanitarian crisis of our time, the war in Syria. What started as a peaceful uprising over 5 years ago has now become a genocide for which Bashar al-Assad is responsible. Just last week, on Monday 19th September, a UN aid convoy carrying critically needed supplies of food and medicine to rebel-held areas of Aleppo was deliberately targeted and bombed. A number of aid workers were killed. Evidence overwhelmingly suggests that Assad's greatest ally, the Russian government, is responsible. This is nothing short of a war crime. This is merely to be added to a long list of atrocities committed against the Syrian people. Not only has Assad used hunger as a weapon of war, ensuring that food supplies cannot reach those that are starving, Assad has used chemical weapons on civilians. He is responsible for the Syrian refugee crisis. The Syrian regime has brutally murdered Syrian civilians, all while maintaining the same rhetoric that it is the terrorists who are to blame. Do not be fooled by Assad's words. This is not an attack on terrorism. This is an attack on humanity, democracy. This is an attack on mothers, children, farmers, dentists, and doctors. This is an attack on human beings just like you and I. Please do not be fooled by Assad's claims that it is an attack on terrorism, because it is in his interest that groups like ISIS continue as they distract the West's attention from the atrocities being committed by the regime. By far, the biggest killer of civilians in Syria is Assad. It is Assad who is the terrorist. The actions of Assad are the actions of a man who does not care about human life, about international law. By doing nothing, we are sending him a message that this brutality is acceptable. I appreciate this is a difficult and complicated situation, but as the Labour Party, we need to ensure that this is at the top of our agenda. We should be doing everything we possibly can to ensure the protection of Syrians and to hold Assad to account. Just some of the things we can do are as follows. Support food drops into besieged areas. It's apparent that travel by road is proving difficult. Call for a no-fly zone. Condemn Assad and his allies at all given opportunities. Do not share platforms with Assadists, and that includes Russian and Iranian state broadcasters. Call for the resettlement of Syrian refugees and hold Theresa May to account on this issue. Listen to what Syrian activists have to say. And finally, please support the White Helmets, the Syrian civil defence. Demand for support for them as they risk their lives every day, working tirelessly to save the lives of those under attack. Please watch the recent documentary about them, which can be found online, and support the receipt of the 2016 Nobel Peace Prize. Thank you.
Delegate.
Conference, morning. Sunny Leong, Chair for Chinese for Labour. Conference, there is huge concern over the rise of racist incidents and attacks since the EU referendum. An outpouring of hate that shocked so many across the country. We, Labour, must take and be seen to take a hard line on such incidents and attacks that creep into the public discourse. Conference, we call on everyone here to focus on multiculturalism and multi-integration. Multiculturalism has often promoted the unique natures of different cultures and communities. We must celebrate all our cultures and also provide much greater opportunities for people to experience and integrate with other cultures so that they can see that different cultures don't threaten British culture, but enhance it. Responsibilities for this lies in part with individuals, in part with government, and in part with us in the ethnic minority community ourselves. Conference, we call on Labour to commit to a zero tolerance from which we can focus on addressing the fractures in our society and challenging the poison of racism from where it manifests itself and at its source. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Conference. And perseverance pays off. I kept going, so I appreciate being allowed to speak. Valerie Lestrade, Enfield Southgate. The Labour Party should put the promotion of human rights and sustainable development at the centre of its foreign policy. Current policy exasperates threats, create political instability, and provide unwarranted support to repressive regimes. I question military spending with no explanation of how it increases our security. The Labour Party acknowledges that there are many threats to security which are not military. We must recognise the causes of such threats as well as the threats themselves, and this needs to be addressed. We need to accept that the real security of people in the UK and globally is not the product of our military might. Challenges to security include tackling the negative effects of climate change and its associated food and water shortages, as well as developing a reliable and clean energy supply. The arms industry has a devastating impact on human rights and security, as well as damaging economic development through the diversion of resources. We send a message of support to many of the world's most repressive regimes when we sell them weapons. Large-scale military procurement and arms exports only reinforce the militaristic approach to international problems. As taxpayers, we subsidize the arms industry disproportionately, and the number of jobs it provides is declining. There is a shortage of skilled engineers needed to tackle climate change. There are many workers within the arms industry where skills match those needed to develop low-carbon technologies that will contribute to the tackling of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Can I now call on Clive Lewis to address us at conference today? Thanks, Clive. Come on, Clive. You've got 5 minutes.
Morning, conference. As a lifelong party activist, it's a great honour not just to address you for the first time, but to do so as Shadow Defence Secretary. I speak today not just as a politician, but as someone who has seen firsthand the consequences when political failure leads us to war. I found there are some who are surprised to find an army veteran serving as a Labour MP, as if it was somehow against the values we collectively believe in. But I see no contradiction between my service and my socialism. I want to pay tribute to the extraordinary men and women of our armed forces who work so hard to keep us safe every single day. They have continued to do so at a time of unprecedented challenges, from operations against Daesh in the Middle East to peacekeeping missions in Somalia, South Sudan, and elsewhere. Our armed forces have been exceptionally busy and dedicated. Conference, when I look at our key military alliance, NATO, I see an organisation that springs directly from our values: collectivism, internationalism, and the strong defending the weak. Its founding charter, a progressive charter, includes standing up for democracy and defending human rights, even if those principles haven't always been held up in practice. There are values that I believe go to the core of our political identity. So, of course, a Labour government would fulfil our international commitments, including those under Article 5. But let's be clear, that means diplomatic as well as military obligations. We cannot have one without the other, and nor should we. Every Labour government since Attlee has met NATO's spending target of at least 2% of GDP every single year. And I can confirm today that the next Labour government will do the same, including our UN and peacekeeping obligations. Of course, what really matters isn't so much what you spend as how you spend it. And when I look at the Tories' record on defence, I do not see a proper recognition of the value of our people. What I do see is a government that has cut the size of the armed forces by a fifth, imposed an effective pay cut year on year. And it's an insult to their dedication that they are not adequately housed. But conference, But conference, let's be honest, there are defence issues on which we have differences. This should not surprise us, though. The security of our country is the first duty of any government, and it demands nothing less than the most rigorous of examination and debate. Friends, we know that nuclear weapons are one of those issues. As you know, I am sceptical about Trident renewal, as are many here in this room today. But I am clear that our party has a policy for Trident renewal. But I also want to be clear that our party's policy is also that we all share the ambition of a nuclear-free world. To conference, we will make our long-standing multilateralism reality, not rhetoric. We will be working with international organisations, including the United Nations General Assembly, First Committee on Disarmament and International Security, within the spirit and the letter of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. That will stand in stark contrast to the Tories' lip service on nuclear disarmament. They have not brought forward a single proposal as how they intend to achieve it. Because conference, we know how Theresa May uses Trident, not as a military weapon aimed at deterring enemies overseas, but as a political weapon aimed at her party's opposition at home, us. So let's not make ourselves an easy target and understand that the best possible chance for a better, safer world is a Labour government. Conference, only we in the Labour Party have the values on which a defence policy fit for the 21st century can be built. We have to rethink what real security means. Increasingly, what threatens us are complex, interlinked systemic forces, the collapse of states, asymmetric warfare, resource depletion, and catastrophic climate change. Each of these will make the lives of hundreds of millions unimaginably hard, starting with the poorest. Every day we see through our media the pitiful pictures of ordinary men, women, and children forced from their homes, families desperately seeking sanctuary from war and social collapse. Conference, this is just the beginning. If we want it to stop, we must look beyond the symptoms and tackle the root causes. The Tories can never do this because their right-wing dogma is the cause. Economic policies that foster rampant inequality, the shoring up of oppressive regimes, conniving in proxy wars, ruthless over-exploitation of natural resources, complacent denialism on climate change. No conference. It will be our values that solve these problems, our internationalism, our passion for social justice, for economic justice, and for environmental justice. Our Labour Party recognises that a world without justice is a world that will never be at peace. By addressing injustice, we can help deliver real security. And if the Tories' philosophy leaves them incapable of dealing with the challenges of the future, their practical choices are no better. When I look at the Tories' record on defence, I can see that with so many of our public services, they simply don't recognise the value of the most important asset we have in this country, our people. The men and women who have this party's deepest respect, that are the backbone of our nation's defence. They are our sons, our daughters, cousins, nieces, nephews. They are all of us. And yet this government has systematically undermined and demoralised far too many of them. They have systematically undermined our industrial communities, ripping up Labour's defence industrial strategy and spent billions overseas instead of investing in British jobs and British steel. I want the money we spend on defence equipment to go not to the cheapest bidder, but to those who pay fair taxes and fair wages, who provide decent jobs and support our communities. And I want to start with the 3 new support ships for our new aircraft carriers. I will campaign for a British bid alongside both our businesses and trade unions like the GMB and Unite. Your members help defend us, and we will help defend them. To conference, when I pledged the next Labour government would invest in defence, let me assure you that we would invest in all of our people, the industrial communities, the civilian staff, and above all, the men and women in our military. When it comes to our armed forces, I was once proud to serve you alongside them. Today, I am proud now to serve them alongside you. Thank you, conference.
Thank you, Clive. And our last speaker in this debate is Barry Gardiner, the Shadow Energy Minister and the Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade. Thank you, Barry.
Barry Gardiner, proud to have been a member of a union for 40 years, proud to have been a Labour Member of Parliament for 19 years, proud in about 19 minutes to have been a member of Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet for 3 months. Conference, we are a proud trading nation. But leaving the EU will profoundly change how we trade. 45% of our exports, 53% of our imports are with the EU. And this level of trade comes with a balance of costs and benefits. The British people decided the current balance is wrong. They didn't, nor could they be expected to establish what the correct balance might be. That is the job that now government and parliament must determine. The trouble is, this government won't tell us how it wants to rebalance the system. Leave the EU. Take back sovereignty. That was what Captain Boris and First Mate Fox were shouting from that imaginary deck of the Royal Yacht Britannia. Now, they're denying you the right to know what sort of deal they're proposing about your future. It's one thing not to provide a running commentary. It's quite another to take a vow of Trappist silence. Surely you have the right to know what the red lines will be, because we know what they promised. Continued access to the single market, no more 350 million a week to Brussels, restricted immigration, and no more laws handed down from Europe. But they know they can't achieve all this. And they won't tell us what their priority is because they disagree amongst themselves. Even if they get market access and end immigration, they'll still have to pay into the budget and accept EU legislation without a seat round the table when the decisions are made. That is not to regain sovereignty. It is to become a vassal state meekly paying tribute to Europe. Conference, this is why we must set out what we want from our future trading relationships. Because British business needs clarity and certainty. They need to plan on a stable base that this government is simply not providing. The Tories' vision of trade is all about deregulation. They want free trade agreements like TTIP and CETA that undermine labour standards and environmental protections, that give foreign investors special rights to undermine our laws, bypassing our courts and claiming compensation from our country because we have the cheek to pass laws to protect the public that might damage their future profits. What sort of sovereignty is this? Every law made to improve your children's environment or extend our workplace equality challenged by a foreign business. If TTIP existed in Dickens' day, we might still be sending kids up chimneys. It's time to wake up to the irony that the very people who claim that they're fighting for our sovereignty are in fact doing most to undermine it. Conference. This government won't even let you see the text of TTIP. Germany, Ireland, the European Parliament, even the United States of America have given elected representatives access to those documents. But this is how Tories conduct trade negotiations. Secret deals, behind closed doors, no parliamentary scrutiny, and no democratic control. This isn't sovereignty, it's the rule of the oligarchs. Today, Labour maps out a different way. A progressive Labour trade policy that puts you in control. Labour will negotiate trade agreements that work not just for big multinationals, but for our small and medium-sized businesses, the dynamic backbone of our economy. They are the innovators and the inventors. They employ 60% of all people in the private sector. And we know that businesses that export are businesses that grow. Under Labour, new trade deals will incorporate an obligation on all partner countries to create an SME access strategy stipulating industry contact points, regulatory support, market intelligence, and translation services. A Labour trade policy, though, is not simply about developing market access. It's about developing markets. We don't want to export so that we can get rich and keep others poor. We want to raise income and standards in our partner countries too, so they can buy more of our goods. We are an internationalist party, and we believe in the dignity of labour, not just in the UK, but everywhere in the globe. So today I'm announcing an international partnership called Just Trading. Sister parties and like-minded legislators working to create a progressive, best-in-class free trade agenda based on dignity, sovereignty, high-quality jobs, and the public good. Just Trading will be exactly that, a community agreeing to trade deals based on just relationships and our shared values. And if anyone doubts our ability to galvanize such progress on the international stage, I ask them simply to look at the Paris Agreement on climate change. Labour's 2008 Climate Change Act is the international standard upon which the Paris Agreement is founded. But last week's leak to the Guardian newspaper shows that here too, our government is negotiating the secret text of a Trade in Services Agreement, TISA, that would undermine our ability to tackle climate change. You know, the irony is this government doesn't need a secret deal to stop them progressing and to stop our progress to a low-carbon, high-skilled future. They've been managing very well without one. Last year, they cut support for solar, and their own figures show deployment has fallen by 93%, losing 12,000 jobs. They've walked away from onshore wind, they've attacked biomass tariffs without any consultation, scrapped 2 world-leading carbon capture and storage projects at the last minute. In fairness, not everything has been cut. Before he was sacked, George Osborne managed to pass what he proudly referred to as the most generous tax regime for shale gas anywhere in the world. Well, that will change under Labour. You see, there are technical problems with fracking, and they give rise to real environmental dangers, but technical problems can be overcome. So on their own, they're not a good enough reason to ban fracking. The real reason to ban fracking is that it locks us into an energy infrastructure that is based on fossil fuels long after our country needs to have moved to clean energy. So today I'm announcing that a future Labour government will ban fracking. And we will consult with our colleagues in industry and the trade unions about the best way to transition our energy industry to create those vital jobs and apprenticeships which we are going to need for the UK's low-carbon future. Energy is the cornerstone of our industry, our economy, our daily lives. Clean energy and low-carbon technologies now employ more people in the UK than the entire teaching profession. They represent just 6% of our economy, but they're responsible for 30% of its growth. We've got to unlock the full potential of this sector. It means skilled jobs, it means growth, it means clean air and a healthy, secure future for our children. Britain is at the beginning of an incredible transformation of our energy system. The next Labour government will launch a new programme called Repowering Britain that puts you in control. It will build on the innovation and leadership of 70 Labour councils who've already committed to run their towns on 100% clean energy by 2050. Because we need to localise the way energy is produced and stored. I want people earning from the energy they produce on their rooftop solar or their community wind turbines, not just consuming what the big six sell. We need to create smart networks and local grids to make energy work to pay people rather than people working to pay their energy bills. How can it be right that when the government found out that we were being overcharged by £1.4 billion a year on our energy bills, they said, it's all you, the customer's fault. You should shop around more. Well, we should. We need to shop around for a new government. A new Labour government will legislate to force the energy companies to put you on their cheapest tariff and to tell you if you can get a better deal from any other company. More people die from cold each winter here in the UK than in Finland. We have 4 million people in fuel poverty, and yet heat is escaping through drafty walls and windows. We will train a skilled workforce to retrofit insulation in Britain's older housing stock to help vulnerable people keep warm and safe and free from fuel poverty. That is why today That is why today, Clive Lewis and I are announcing that the next Labour government will roll out a Homes Fit for Heroes programme that will insulate the homes of our disabled veterans for free. Conference, true sovereignty doesn't come with nationalistic Tory slogans. True sovereignty comes when, as ordinary people, we take extraordinary control over our own lives. Internationally, Labour will create free trade agreements that allow people all over the world to take real control of their own future. And here, we will repower Britain to take back control in our own homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry, and that brings to an end the international debate. We have overrun, but don't blame the chair. It would have been very wrong for me to cut off any of the shadow cabinet speakers, although, Barry, as you're the last speaker, and take this in the spirit it is meant, when you mentioned a new government, you might want to buy a new watch as well. Thank you. We will now hand over to Paddy Lillis, who will take you through the economy debate. Thank you.
Morning conference. We will spend the rest of the morning discussing the economy. The Policy Commission annual report is on pages 8 to 13 of the National Policy Forum report, and the priorities issues document is on pages 50 and 57. We will also be taking the contemporary composites on employment rates and the industrial strategy. Can I now ask Jenny Formby to move the Policy Commission's annual report on behalf of the National Executive?
Conference comrades Jenny Formby, Unite and the NEC moving the MPF annual report and the Commission's priority issue document. And in doing so, I'd like to thank my co-convener Margaret Beckett, as well as James and all the party staff and all the other Commission members who've worked so hard after the last 12 months. But first, let me just say, after a very long and distracting contest, I'm so pleased that Jeremy has won again the election as leader of the Labour Party. Because now we can get back to work. We can move away from internal navel gazing and we can unite to fight for a Labour government in 2020. A Labour government with clear policies to transform our society into one that works for everyone, not just a privileged few. And the discussions we've had in the Economy Commission are exactly about what that society would look like. Over the last year, under Jeremy's leadership and with John McDonnell as a brilliant shadow Chancellor, Labour has become a clear anti-austerity party, consistently opposing Osborne's Charter, now completely discredited and in tatters, together with the rest of the Tories' failed and failing economic plans. And of course, the last budget confirmed what we all know, that figures on growth, wages, business investment, productivity, they've all been revised down, as they have for every year the Tories have been in power. So many companies have continued with their obsession of financial short-termism, leading to damaging and ongoing investment strike, starving industry of the opportunity it needs to grow and develop for the future. And of course now the uncertainty that the Brexit vote brings hangs over all of us, with no clear pathway being shown by May's government. What we've seen over the last year is a culmination of 6 years of Tory economic failure. Failure to invest in our infrastructure, failure to deliver the high-skilled, high-paid jobs that we so desperately need, failure to plan for the economy of tomorrow. And this continuing Tory failure is putting any chance of an economic recovery at risk. It's risking the future of jobs, it's risking the future of the communities we live and work in, it's risking the very fabric of what should be a caring and supportive society. And that's why the work of the Economy Policy Commission is so important. We've got to develop clear economic policy that shows how we'll fight austerity, how we'll boost manufacturing, how we'll rebuild our infrastructure, and in doing so, start to restore the balance between the haves and the have-nots. An economic policy built on the principles of equality and fairness. So the priority for the Commission has been and will continue to be to look at what we've got to do to make sure our nation's prosperity is secured, to deliver both for working people and for everyone else in our society. In particular, we've looked at what has to happen to improve our dismal record on productivity. We've heard from trade unions, from businesses and from hundreds of party members, and the report outlines key priorities for the coming months. A genuine, proactive, long-term industrial strategy that lays the foundations to rebuild our economy, government investment in infrastructure and skills to boost productivity, re-looking at how we use public procurement, ensuring prosperity reaches every corner of the country by establishing a national investment bank, supported by a series of regional investment banks to work with councils, unions and businesses to deliver growth and jobs. We're very ambitious about the policy platform that Labour will take to the British people at the next general election. We've got to offer more than the cuts too far, too fast rhetoric of 2015. And we're making sure that we're coherent and credible in everything that we do, to make sure everyone knows what our policies are and that they understand the true benefits they could bring. We've already shown what we can achieve in Parliament, even in opposition when we work together. Just look at how together we defeated the attacks on PIP payments and tax credits, how we've kept the spotlight on the huge extent of corporate tax avoidance. And great credit to Becky Long-Bailey with stepping in at the last minute to fight the tax cut in corporation tax and capital gains tax in the finance bill. We've got much to do, but when we work together, we can show that Labour is strong, that together we can be credible on the economy, and together we can defeat austerity. Thank you.
Conference, I'm now pleased to ask the Shadow Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Rebecca Long-Bailey, to address conference. Rebecca.
Now, I'm proud to represent the people of Salford and Eccles, and I'm proud to be British. We need to build a proper industrial strategy, one that invests in the people of Britain, a patriotic industrial strategy. But patriotism isn't only about supporting our troops or cheering on Jessica Ennis or Mo Farah. When you pay your taxes, you're investing in the people of Britain. When you work in or support British industry, you are investing in the people of Britain. You are investing in schools, in hospitals, roads and railways. So patriotism is not just about waving a flag during the World Cup. It is a real, lifelong commitment to the people around you. And this commitment to the people of Britain should be woven into every aspect of the UK economy. Now, Salford, where I'm from, was once an industrial heartland. We manufactured some of the world's greatest products, and for a long time our industry was the envy of the world. But from the 1980s onwards, we saw the mass deindustrialisation of our towns and cities. Successive Tory governments turned their back on the people of Britain. Factories were closed and jobs were outsourced. But we were told that it was all okay. We were told that the wealth would eventually trickle down. Well, it didn't. Communities were devastated. They suffered decades of decline, and this lack of investment resulted in our economy becoming dangerously unbalanced. It was skewed towards the bankers in the City of London, skewed towards the South East, and skewed towards unskilled, low-security jobs. The financial services sector was relied upon too heavily to drive the economy, but as we know from the financial crash, we can't lean so heavily on just one sector of our economy. And this was a crisis caused by greed, but the pain was borne by ordinary people, not by the bankers and the institutions who caused it. And it was these deindustrialised communities who suffered the worst from this financial crisis. And when many of us in the Labour Party were out canvassing during the EU referendum, we could feel the anger from those communities who felt left behind. Anger that their public services, NHS and schools were being starved of funding. Anger that they can't get a decent home. Anger that our older people who've put so much into this country are not getting the support they deserve. Anger that servicemen and women come back from war to a system that does not look after them after the sacrifices they have made for this country. Anger that this government has sat on its hands and looked on as a small minority of people and businesses put their own financial gains ahead of the rest of us through tax avoidance. And anger that we see workers exploited on 0 hours contracts. At Sports Direct, workers were so frightened of losing their jobs that one woman gave birth in a toilet. We cannot afford to carry on as we are. We have got to build a new economy. Now, my mum has a little saying, back us into a corner at your peril. We will always come out fighting. And we are fighting. Fighting to make our economy great, to make our economy fair, and to make our industry the envy of the world. And at the heart of this is making sure that the prosperity we generate reaches every corner of this country so that no community is ever left behind again. Now, if the government bothered to look, it would see the enormous potential Britain already has to create this vision. Despite the savage destruction in our industrial heartlands, we already have the industries of the future waiting to sprout up in advanced manufacturing, healthcare technologies, low carbon and renewable energies. A green economy is a sustainable economy, an economy that will build resilient communities, an economy that will create jobs and prosperity. And with the ingenuity and skills of the people of Britain, the quality of our academic institutions and the enterprising nature of our businesses, Labour will make sure that Britain leads us into the next industrial revolution. So how will we do this? Well, we've already committed to a national education service, making sure that the skills we need in our economy will be there. We've already committed to mobilising £500 billion between a national investment bank and a network of regional development banks, and a public investment commitment. This isn't just talk. Businesses here in the North West, where I'm from especially, need a single point of contact for accessing funds. We'll provide the infrastructure workers and businesses need to succeed by investing in high-quality transport across the whole country, alongside a commitment to meet the best broadband internet standards in the world. And we'll also make sure that we're at the forefront of innovation, that this is properly funded, mission-orientated and led by the public and private sectors collaboratively. So it's the UK who creates the wonder products of the future. We need to restore justice to our economy. Now, Theresa May has the barefaced cheek to talk about equality of opportunity, while she's turning a blind eye to tax avoidance and even closing HMRC offices down. While millions of people are queuing for food banks, while HMRC is doing deals with huge corporations like Google to cut their tax bills. Now, Philip Green took £1.2 billion out of BHS in dividends, fees and rental payments. All of this was tax efficient and done through offshore structures. And now he is sailing around in his £100 million super yacht, while 20,000 BHS employees and pensioners are frightened for their futures. An estimated £25 billion is lost each year through tax avoidance, some of which are in offshore havens in British Crown dependencies. Now, Labour will stop this. We will create a full public inquiry into the tax avoidance industry. We will rewrite our tax avoidance rules. The Tory anti-avoidance rule was never expected to work, even by the Tory standards. So we will rewrite those rules. We will build them on the principle that everybody pays their fair share. We'll ensure that HMRC and the courts have the tools to truly neutralise tax avoidance schemes wherever they may find them. And we'll invest, not cut, HMRC so that it has the staff to confront the tax dodgers. Now, finally, I'm pleased to announce to conference today that we're going to go even further than this to rebuild and transform British industry. And today, Labour is launching a wide-ranging consultation which will establish the priorities, interventions, institutions and processes needed to truly deliver a successful industrial strategy. This Tory government talks about industrial strategies a lot, but Labour will put our methods into practice and we will build a vision for the future. We will focus on jobs, productivity, sustainability, regional and sectoral balances. We'll work together with businesses, the trade union movement, the third sector, the public sector and other industry stakeholders to truly establish the foundations of our new economy. Conference, Labour will build the British economy of the future. An economy to make the people of Britain proud. An economy based on patriotism that demonstrates a real lifelong commitment to the people of Britain. It will be fair, it will be green, and it will be the best. So let's make Britain the envy of the world.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that. Conference, we will now take the contemporary composites on employment rights. And the first is composite 1 to be moved by TSSA. And could Newcastle Central CLP be ready to second? Can I also put composite 2 on notice? UCAT and Dundee City East to be also be ready. TSSA.
Good morning. Chair, Conference, Manuel Cortez, Transport Salaried Staff Association, moving Composite 1 on employment rights. You know, like many of you in this hall, I voted to stay in the EU. Our union campaigned extremely hard to try and get people to vote to stay in the EU. But unfortunately, the vote did not go our way. And we have to now accept the will of the British people. But that doesn't mean that we don't fight again so that we get a people's Brexit. A people's Brexit where all the employment rights that we currently got, we keep. A people's Brexit where we unite our communities across our land because we've got far more in common than that divides us. A people's Brexit that ensures that we rebuild a social and economic infrastructure by doing things like building 1 million new council homes. And a people's Brexit will ensure that we do not have a race to the bottom trade deals that push further deregulation and privatisation so that the likes of Branson do not get the grabby hands even more on an NHS. But you know, Conference, the Tories are in trouble. When they appoint a bumbling buffoon, Davis and Fox, to go out there and get us trade deals, we know they're in trouble. And that's why we must unite. We must unite to ensure that we put a coherent strategy in front of the British people. You know, those 3 cabinet ministers have got 2 things in common. They can't stand the sight of each other. And the second thing they've got in common is that they haven't got a clue. They're absolutely clueless what to do with the mess that Brexit has created. And our people expect us to provide the solutions. And you know, Brexit is really important. Whatever decisions are made ain't just going to affect you. It's going to affect our children and our grandchildren. And that's why we need to get it right. And it's too important to be left solely to the Tories. That's why, to get a people's Brexit, we need our parties and we need our trade unions to be involved in the negotiations. This cannot be negotiations behind closed doors. It cannot be another TTIP. It cannot be another teaser. It has to be open. It has to be transparent. And it has to be subject to democratic scrutiny and accountability. And you know what? Does anybody here trust the Tories to do that? No. And that's why we need to start from today. When we leave this hall, we need to start a campaign for a people's Brexit. A people's Brexit where no one is left behind. I move.
Morning, Chair, Conference, comrades. I have to follow that, unfortunately. I've only got 3 minutes to speak, but to be perfectly honest, that's more time than the government gave to thinking about what the plan should be following the UK leave vote. I'm delighted to second this motion. Our CLP are really concerned about what happens next. Following the vote that we've all been involved in. This motion brings together the debates from the whole of this morning's discussions, and I think we need to work together, trade unionists, comrades in the party, front bench team, the European Labour Party, to work together to make sure we protect workers' rights. And it is Labour at all levels of the party. It is us on the ground, it is our elected representatives across Europe who can do that. Those really hard-won fights are around the Working Time Directive, which limits the amount of hours people have to work a week, maternity and paternity rights, free movement of workers, not just free movement of capital, holiday entitlement, health and safety regulations. As a comrade said earlier today, what some people call red tape, we've worked hard to protect. More so, women and part-time workers' rights. Really crucial rights that we've fought for, and not ignoring young people who are caught with no hope for the future because what they're offered is zero-hour contracts. And of course, the disabled community, disabled people's employment rights are part of what we have achieved. And it's also about workplaces, safe and friendly workplaces, the environment in which we work. They've been hard-fought gains. We've all been involved in that at different levels of our work. Conference, this motion calls for the Labour Party to work together across all of those levels to ensure that we are leading that debate, making sure that our demands are met and our rights are protected. That includes, as Manuel has just said, trade unionists and party members need to be involved in those so that our voices are heard. It is by working together that we can ensure human rights are continue to be achieved and that the commitments to the environment that we've heard so eloquently put this morning are protected. Our party at every level, Conference, must do that. We've got a campaign, lead that campaign and protect our employment rights and further ensure that the Brexit negotiations are led by us. Today's the theme for this conference is about working together for real change. So let's get on with doing that, Conference. We can and we will lead this agenda because the Tories won't do it. I believe that we can. There's a vacuum in negotiating our rights. So let's get together and fill that vacuum. I second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Can I call the next Compensate 2 to be moved by UCAT and seconded by Dundee City East CLP? And can contemporary 3 movers and seconder, USDO and Labour students, get ready?
Chair Conference, Brian Rye, Acting General Secretary of Construction Union UCAT, moving Composite 2 on a flexible pension age. Conference, what defines the Labour Party and sets it apart from all other political parties is our fundamental belief in social justice. Our belief that no group should be fundamentally discriminated against or unfairly treated. Sadly, we need to recognise that on the issue of pension age, the previous Labour government failed and the current Conservative government are making a bad situation worse. A one-size-fits-all pension age is inherently discriminatory. It takes no account of the ability of a worker to actually undertake the tasks they're employed to do. It doesn't take a genius to work out that whilst doctors and lawyers are likely to be able to keep working longer than a brickie or a prison officer, yet they are both entitled to a pension at the same age. Research by the TUC published this month revealed that 1 in 8 workers are forced to retire 5 years before the current pension age. Workers are being thrown into limbo, too old to work, but too young to receive a pension. Or to paraphrase Tracy Chapman, no, I won't sing it, their bodies too old for working, their bodies too young to look like this. As a party, we need to stop throwing people onto the scrap heap where, despite a lifetime of work, they are not able to retire with dignity. Instead, they are forced, through no fault of their own, into the misery of relying upon benefits, eking out their existence until they qualify for a pension. Conference, this problem will only get worse. The pension age will rise to 67 by 2026 and to 68 by 2044. George Osborne, the heir to a wallpaper empire, strongly suggested while he was Chancellor that the pension age will rise further to 70. The justification for these rises is that people are living longer. But that in itself is not the complete truth. Workers in professional roles, yes, doctors, lawyers and accountants, have a life expectancy of 80. But for many manual workers, their life expectancy is under 73 years. With the life expectancy of manual workers rising more slowly than other groups, we have created a double whammy for manual workers, forced to retire before the pension age and then likely to die 7 years before many others. That is not social justice. This is discrimination by job, and it is simply not acceptable for this party to tolerate such a policy. That is why today we need to generate a great leap forward in party policy, to agree the principle of a flexible pension age, to allow workers in certain trades to have the option of retiring earlier. The detail can be worked out later, but Conference, if we are to win back the support of many workers and to convince them that we are on their side, we need policies that prove this. A policy of a flexible pension age would begin the process of reconnecting with our grassroots. It is a total fallacy to suggest that hard work never killed anyone. As the evidence shows, it will shorten your life. And during that working life, the cumulative effect of heavy lifting, working outside in all conditions, long hours and a poor diet means that workers slowly become crippled and maimed until they can't go on. Let us give workers in physically demanding jobs the chance to have dignity they deserve. I ask Conference to support a flexible pension age. I move.
Hello, my name is Mark, first-time delegate at this conference, and although I'm here from Dundee, I did grow up in this city of Liverpool. Retirement for people my age is a distant concept. However, as long as any issue affects any one of us in our communities, in our workplace, in our family, then it's an issue which should concern us all. As with any belief on a particular proposal, this one can be explained with a personal story. I live with my gran, my Nana Shirley. She left school at 14 and she entered the world of work right away. Throughout her life, the V in her CV stood for varied. She worked in retail, in hospitality, and laterally as a cleaner. She worked proudly all her life, and she was even stood at the till, serving customers in a shop, the very day she gave birth to my mother. In working so hard, she took labour values perhaps a little too literally. My Nana Shirley, she's never been work shy, and she never missed a day at her job. That is until 5 years ago, she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and osteoarthritis. And she had to give up her job because she simply couldn't keep it up. It was a difficult thing for her to do, and anyone who knows her knows that it was the last thing she ever wanted to do. And thus began a long, stressful process of convincing the DWP that her struggle was real. Despite a doctor's diagnosis, try as she might, they stubbornly refused to recognize that she was unfit for work. They ignored her when she said that she would work if she still could. They demeaned her and made her search for jobs that she knew and they knew she would never be able to take. And her situation could have been so much easier, so much fairer, so much more dignifying if the severity of her condition was recognized and the right to retire was granted. So what does it say about the stresses and strains of the modern British workplace when 1 in 8 workers must leave before their time? And more importantly, what does it say about modern British society if we don't treat these folks with the respect and compassion they have more than earned? We are better than that, which is why I urge you to support this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the speakers. Can I now call on Composite 3 to be moved by Usdaw, and could Labour students be ready to second?
Conference, John Hannett, General Secretary of the Shopworkers Union, Usdaw. Delegates, for too long, the lives of too many working people are blighted by poverty. 6 million people paid less than the living wage, and even more work is not on enough hours to make work pay. 1.7 million on 0-hour contracts, and 5.4 million underemployed. People doing the right thing, contributing to society, but finding it extremely difficult to cope. Rebecca was right when she referred to the scandal of BHS, and let me say our members in BHS, these are real people on the receiving end of a massive greed culture with no recourse at the moment. And that's why capital cannot go unfettered. Delegates, no security of hours and certainly no security of income in today's society is not right. But for employers, the question of flexibility in a modern age must go two ways. The contribution people do in the workplace has to be recognised by the employers, but not for the hours they need and currently struggling to make ends meet with the contract they should deserve. Delegates, conference, trade unions like mine and the trade union movement play a crucial role in bringing fairness and balance to the workplace. And I invite and I appeal to those non-union employers not only to recognise the value of trade unions, but recognise our right to bring that independence to the workplace. Even today, delegates, in 2016, it's too often that although you have a right to be a legal right to be a member of a union, too many employers not only resist it, but do everything to intimidate those people away from trade unions. And it's so sad that our trade unions that have proven, all of the unions represented here, have not only brought added value to the workplace, we've done a job that puts some fairness in terms of the employment contract. Now, let me give you one quick example to make the point. One of our members who works for a non-union business, campaigning to bring members in, join them up, is scared to acknowledge to the company she's a member of a trade union. That cannot be right, delegates, in this day and age. She should be proud of a membership of a trade union. And delegates, don't fall for the trick that effectively unions are a problem causer. it's unions that are the problem solvers. We're the ones who are in the biggest companies in the country, where those countries are working well and are highly profitable. So, delegates, in a modern world of work, where work is changing, we must strive for that right of independence and to ensure that work is treated fairly and employees rewarded accordingly. Now, delegates, politicians often speak and make speeches and do it very well. But the real gift of a politician isn't the words on the paper, but the deeds and the follow-through. Theresa May moved into Downing Street promising to be a Tory Prime Minister who would fight against injustice and poverty, and we must hold her to account for the words. Vowing to help those who are just managing, and promising that her government will be driven not by the interests of the privileged, but by the ordinary people. Does she mean it? Well, we will see. Why hasn't she silenced those calling for those who want to scrap the national living wage? And by God, wasn't it a great achievement of our Labour government, sometimes who people say didn't achieve much, who introduced the minimum wage, and I'm proud to be a low-pay commissioner. And I say this not to live in the past, but if you rubbish your record in government, don't be surprised if your opponents take advantage of it. And John and Jeremy and the current Labour opposition now must pick up the mantle of how to win again. We'll all have our roles to play within that. We'll all have our responsibilities to return Labour to power. Won't be easy, but we can do it. We did it in '97 and we won 3 times. And finally, conference, let me say this. Opposition is a cold place. You can have all the moral arguments you want, you can have all the principles and all the values, but you can't put them in action if you do not win. And let me say also, finally, because my Deputy General Secretary is in the chair and I can't abuse I want to say a thank you to the Lords and other people who fought against tax credits and helped us with resisting the trade union bill. They did a great job. Thank you.
Labour students.
Kate Dayden, on behalf of Labour students, first-time delegate and first-time speaker. Conference, at the start of the new academic year, I am proud that thousands of those students returning to university and college do so as Labour students. And I am proud that thousands more will join our movement at Freshers' Fairs across Britain. For the next year, we will work tirelessly for Labour. We'll be in Witney and we'll be in Batney and Spen, just like we were in Oldham and in Tooting. We'll be in Manchester and Liverpool, just like we were with Sadiq in London. And we'll be running some of the most creative and dynamic campaigns on campuses up and down the country. But the harsh reality is that our travel fund can only stretch so far. For a lot of my members, a job alongside their studies is a necessity. And it's not just paying their way to a campaign day. It's their food and their rent, their bills and their books, and their families and those they care for. And let's face it, conference, these young people are some of the most insecure and vulnerable workers. And on top of this, few are protected by a trade union. For those that attend university, they leave with thousands and thousands of pounds of debt and are thrust into a brutal graduate market, where 25% of graduates are earning just £11,500 a year. This conference, for a generation saddled with sky-high tuition fees, mountains of debt and rocketing rent, is simply unacceptable. But it's not just graduates who are under threat from the Tories' regressive action on fair pay. For those young people in training and in apprenticeships, or still in college and school, wages are stagnating. The Tories are taking our optimism and our hope for the future and replacing it with uncertainty and fear.
That's why we need a real living wage for all young workers. Because we know that we can't trust the Tories and their definition of the living wage. Their definition will only contribute to the worst extremes of poverty in Britain. A Labour living wage will mean a real terms pay increase for the 1 in 5 workers in Britain on low pay. It will change people's lives, just like when a Labour government changed people's lives with the introduction of the national minimum wage. Because as with all the great pioneering Labour policies of the past, we know that this is not a single issue fight. Introducing the national minimum wage wasn't just about low pay. It was about families, it was about businesses, and it was about improving society. It empowered women, ethnic minorities, disabled workers, and of course, young people. And it's in this spirit and tradition that the next Labour government must renew its commitment to changing people's lives. And Conference, that means smashing the gender pay gap, fighting against low pay, and closing the gap between youth and adult unemployment. We must expose the myth on the Tory living wage, an outright lie which takes a simple, fair idea that what you earn should be enough to live on, and twisting it to win votes and to help no one. I want to leave this conference and go back to my members, my neighbours, and be proud that my party will fight for them. You need to invest in us and in our future. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we now take Composite 4 on industrial strategy to be moved by Unite? And can CWU be ready to second Unite?
Chair Conference, Len McCluskey, Unite, moving Composite 4. Colleagues, we've had a rough couple of months, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But don't let that overshadow some of the changes our movement has been instrumental in making over the last year. We've been moving the political dial, changing the terms of debate, and on nothing more than the issue of industrial strategy. A year ago, with the Tories just re-elected, industrial strategy was on the outer fringes of political thinking. Now, it's on the nameplate of the business department in Whitehall. That is a vital change, an overdue change, a change from the do-nothing industrial policies, the indifference to manufacturing, which has marked the last 30 years of government. And it's a change for which this party and our leader can take much of the credit. You know, colleagues, when Jeremy went to Port Talbot, stood alongside our steelworkers and said government cannot let this great British industry go to the wall because of blinkered neoliberal ideology, he was speaking for millions of working people who know that laissez-faire has failed and that we need a new economic model. And colleagues, I believe this party is united in rejecting austerity, another positive change from a year ago. We must of course be more than just anti-austerity. We must be for something too. Labour must offer a real, bold alternative, one that captures the aspirations of working people. And the excellent Becky Long-Bailey and this composite sets it out. At the heart of Labour's plan for Britain is an industrial strategy, backed by a national investment bank and regional development strategies, supported through public procurement and insourcing, with tax policies to support industrial development, creating new jobs and apprenticeships, and which will take action to save our foundation industries like steel that guarantees the future of British manufacturing. The old model has failed, it has crashed and burned, and we can say loud and proud, here is Labour's forward-looking policies. One that fairly redistributes the gains to be made from automation, from technological advances and from the developing gig economy. One that offers young people hope, that reverses the explosion of insecure, zero-hour jobs and poverty wages. An economy built for the millions and not for the millionaires. That takes some of the wad of banknotes out of the pockets of the Mike Ashleys of this world and redistributes it to the people slaving to keep the economy moving. Conference at Sports Direct, Unite has shown what can be done from the warehouse floor. So I now call on Labour MPs to show what they can do from the Commons floor. Unite the party and back its leadership so that we can all fight together for this new economy. Colleagues, the Tories may steal our language, but it is only Labour who can deliver the vision. A vision of socialist change and a rejection of free market capitalism. It was Harold Wilson who won 4 general elections, who once said that if Labour is not a moral crusade, then we are nothing. Now, I've heard people lecture us about the futility of principles without power. But comrades, we've also seen where power without principles leads to. Dissolution. It leads conference. It leads to disillusionment, disappointment, and ultimate defeat. Of course, we must win power. But we must also use power for our people, for working people. So I ask all of you not to be debilitated by the media and those within our own ranks who seek to undermine your confidence in the fight that lies ahead. And so I say, conference, to the merchants of doom, in the words of Shakespeare's Henry V, if you have no stomach from this fight, depart the battlefield. Because sisters, and brothers, in my 45 years in our party, I have never known such a battle that lies ahead for a better Britain and for our ideals. What we need now is brave men and women with the courage and commitment to fight for our cause, the cause of true Labour. I move.
Chair Conference, Dave Ward, Communication Workers Union, to second Composite 4. And to absolutely reinforce what Len McCluskey has just said. You know, this is a moment where this country needs fundamental change, not tinkering at the edges, and the leader of the Labour Party represents that absolutely, and we've got to get behind him. We need a bold and radical economic, industrial, housing, well-to-work policy. And you know the legacy, let's unite. It's entirely possible for this Labour Party, our Labour Party, to win back power. But we do need to expose the Tories now. We do need to unite around that. Their legacy is not just
austerity or growing inequality, as devastating as that has been for millions of people in this country. It is one of absolute and massive economic and industrial failure. Stagnating living standards, the highest levels ever recorded of in-work poverty, the lowest levels ever recorded of wage growth, the world of insecure employment, which is about crap jobs, is about making people's standard of living never ever being able to reach out for anything in this country. They have failed on every single one of their economic targets: growth, deficit reduction, government debt. And they failed to protect British industries. Do you know there's a disease in Britain? And it's a disease that is about people in the boardroom who seem to be celebrated not because they grow things like the old industrialists of years ago, because they bloody well break things up. A case study is the Post Office. The Post Office is in crisis. You know, they've spent £2 billion over recent years, and they tell the British public that they're investing in the Post Office. They're not. They're getting rid of good quality jobs, sending it down the road in the back of places like Smith's, and the taxpayer is absolutely subsidising that. It is wrong, and we've got to stand up for a universal service. We're calling for a bold new industrial strategy that needs to be underpinned by a very radical communications and world-leading infrastructure. Let's have a new vision for the Post Office. Let's establish a post bank that ends financial exclusion, that means an end to dodgy pay loan lending companies, that supports a national credit union. Let's make sure that we renationalise Royal Mail, and let's make sure that we support the infrastructure of this country by investing in high-speed, super-fast broadband, not by franchising out a company, but by supporting companies like BT with decent unionised jobs. And let's challenge once and for all the dogma of failed privatisation. Conference, we have a moment here where we can unite this country, we can unite the labour movement, and we can stand up for working people once again. But it will mean challenging the balance of forces, and it will mean ultimately putting the values of our people in front of the values of profit. I second.
Okay, conference, we can squeeze in 2 speakers before the next guest. There, and let's see, can I get some of this side? Look at this side. There we go. Yeah. Colleagues, there'll be more opportunities this afternoon when the economic debate continues.
Thank you, Chair. Tony Burke of Unite the Union. Comrades, our concern on Composite 1 is that it could be interpreted as a denial of the democratic voice of the country. However, Unite wants to make it absolutely clear that Article 50 must not be triggered until we know what has been negotiated, and that any negotiations must protect our members' jobs and our employment rights. Now, turning to the other composites, with the change in direction of the Labour Party, we have an opportunity in moving beyond the call for repeal of anti-union laws. We need to draw up a new framework of trade union rights. And I want to commend the work of the Institute of Employment Rights in being a steadfast supporter of our unions and for producing this excellent manifesto for a positive reform of employment rights. This manifesto goes beyond repeal and sets out a new framework for three fundamental issues. First, the right to organise into unions. New organising rights must go further than the current law, with its exemptions for small companies and employer-defined bargaining rights. The right to organise must include the recruitment and organisation of workers free from the interference of employers and American-style union busters. And secondly, collective bargaining. The key impact of the anti-union laws has hastened the decline of union-led collective bargaining at sectoral level. It's created a cheap labour zero-hours climate. And the restoration of sectoral bargaining will extend the benefits of a union-negotiated agreement to all workers in an industry, irrespective of employment status. And so we welcome the commitment from Jeremy and John to support sectoral collective bargaining. And finally, comrades, we must have an unequivocal right to strike. Comrades, we've lost count at the number of our unions who've been served with injunctions to stop disputes and strikes for the most trivial of reasons. Injunctions granted overnight, spurious challenges to ballots by companies who refuse to negotiate properly or are just plain incompetent. Conference, without an unambiguous right to strike, collective bargaining is reduced to collective begging. Comrades, support the right to organise, support sectoral collective bargaining, and support the right to strike.
Conference, Linda Hobson, Unison NHS worker, speaking in support of Composite 3. The planned decimation of our public services by the Tory government is hitting our local councils particularly hard, and our people are paying the devastating consequences. Youth services are at the front line of these Tory cuts, and Unison's report, A Future at Risk, shows that nearly 95% of youth workers have seen cuts to their services, and 50% of councils over the last 12 months have cut spending on youth centres, outreach support and advice for young people. Over 140,000 places for young people across youth services lost. Over 3,500 youth work jobs gone. 600 youth centres closed. And this is not a list to be proud of. But let us pay credit to those youth workers who work tirelessly to support our young people, helping them into employment and into education, especially those young people with less traditional and more challenging backgrounds, and I should know because I was one of them. And just as young people need this service the most, these vital services are being withdrawn. Conference, as a mum to two young boys, they're not boys, they're young men, I really fear the message that we are sending out to our young people as a consequence of Tory policies. As I visit universities with my 17-year-old son, Ben, who has just literally this minute passed his driving test. Well done, Ben. And I wonder how we're going to pay for it. He'll be the first person in our family who'll be going to university. So I really do want to make sure he has that opportunity. And as I look at my niece, Leanne, who's now a proud Unison member, she's under 25, and she wasn't worthy of the living wage. In Conference, too many of our young, low-paid workers are stranded on poverty pay or are being saddled with vast amounts of debt. And let's be clear, this is an attack on our young people, your young people. It's age discrimination, and just as we would fight for equal pay for women, we must stand together, and Labour must push for a real living wage and for that to be extended to all young workers. Thank you.
Thank you to all the movers and seconders of the composites. We move now to our final speaker of the morning, the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, John MacDonald.
Thanks, Conference. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you. We've got a lot to get through. Thank you. Thanks. Wait till you hear what I've got to say. But now the leadership election is over, I tell you, we have to become a government in waiting. An election could come at any time. Theresa May has said that she'll not be calling an early election. But when could anyone trust the word of a Tory leader? We have to prepare ourselves not just to fight an election, but also for moving into government. So to do that successfully, we have to have the policies and the plans for implementation on the shelf in place for when we enter government, whenever that election comes. So everybody in the party, at every level and in every role, needs to appreciate the sense of urgency of this task. So in this speech, I want to address some of the key issues we will face and how we'll face them. First, though, we need to appreciate the mess that the Tories are leaving behind when we go into government. 6 years ago, 6 years on from when they promised to eliminate the government's deficit in 5 years, they're nowhere near that goal. The national debt burden was supposed to be falling by last year, and it's still rising. In money terms, it now stands at £1.6 trillion. Our productivity has fallen far behind. Each hour worked in the US or Germany or France is 1/3 more productive than each hour worked here. Our economy is failing on productivity because the Tories are failing to deliver the investment it needs. And government investment is still planned to fall in every year remaining of this Parliament. And in the real world economy that our people live in, wages are still lower than they were before the global financial crisis in 2008. There are now at least 800,000 people on zero-hour contracts, unable to plan from 1 week to the next, and the number continues to rise. There's nearly 500,000 in bogus self-employment. 86% of the austerity cuts have fallen on women. And tragically, there's nearly 4 million of our children living in poverty. This isn't right, is it? In the fifth richest economy in the world, poverty on that scale. So let's talk about the immediate issues facing us. On Brexit, we campaigned to remain, and we campaigned hard to remain, but we have to respect the decision of the referendum. But that doesn't mean we have to accept what the Tories serve up for our future relationship with Europe. Since Brexit, the Tories have come up with no plan whatsoever. They have no clue. Half of them want a hard Brexit to walk away from 30 years of investment in our relationship with Europe. Some are just paralysed by the scale of the mess they created. So what we'll do is we'll be working with our socialist and social democratic colleagues across Europe, and our aim is to create a new Europe, which builds upon the benefits of the EU but tackles the perceived disbenefits. I set out in Labour's red lines on the Brexit negotiations a few days after the vote. So let's get it straight. We have to protect jobs here. So we will seek to preserve access to the single market for goods and services. Today, access to the single market requires free movement of labour, but we'll address the concerns that people have raised in the undercutting of wages and conditions and the pressure on local public services. I tell you this, we will not let the Tories bargain away our workers' rights either. We will defend the rights of EU nationals that live and work here and UK citizens currently living and working in Europe. We were all appalled at the attacks that took place on the Polish community in our country following the Brexit vote. Let's be clear, as a party, we will always stand up against racism and xenophobia in any form. In the negotiations, we also want Britain to keep its stake in the European Investment Bank. At the centre of the negotiations is Britain's financial services industry. Our financial services have been placed under threat as a result of the vote to leave. Labour has said clearly we will support access to European markets for the financial sector. But our financial services must understand that 2008 must never happen again. We must never. The message is clear to them. We will not tolerate a return to the casino economy that contributed to that crash ever again. We will support financial services where they deliver a clear benefit for the whole community, not just enriching a lucky few. We'll work with the finance sector to develop this new deal with finance for the British people. We'll fight for the best possible Brexit deal for the British people. And there'll be no more support for TTIP or any other trade deal that promotes deregulation or privatisation here or across Europe. And we'll make sure that any future Labour government has the power to intervene in our economy in the interests of the whole country. For Britain to prosper in that new Europe and on the world stage, our next major challenge is to call a halt to this government's austerity programme. The Conservative Party built upon the disaster of the 2008 financial crisis by introducing an austerity programme that has made the impact of the economic crisis more prolonged, protected the corporations and the rich, and made the rest of society pay for the mistakes and greed of the speculators that caused the crash. Last year, this conference determined that this party would oppose austerity, and that's exactly what we've done. And we've had some successes. We've forced the reversal of tax credit cuts. We also fought and won to have the personal independence payments cut scrapped. Sometimes, in this movement, we don't thank people enough. So I want to thank Owen Smith for the work he's done working with Jeremy to defeat the Tories on this issue. And I want to thank Angela Smith and her team in the Lords for the terrific work the Lords team has worked to defeat these Tories. I say that as someone who's campaigned to abolish them for 30 years. I'm having a rethink. These are tangible victories that are making a real difference to people's lives. I'll tell you, this is what we can achieve when we're united. When we're united. So when we go into government united, be clear, be absolutely clear, we will end this government's austerity programme that's damaged so many lives and so many communities. But the first step, yes, is opposing austerity. The second is creating the alternative. So exactly as our economic advisor, Nobel Prize winner Joe Stiglitz said, we have to rewrite the rules of our economy. We will rewrite the rules to the benefit of working people on taxes, on investment, and how our economic institutions work. So on tax, we know we can't run the best public services in the world on a flagging economy with a tax system that does not tax fairly or effectively. I want to congratulate a group of people as well, and Jonathan Reynolds in particular, because the Christians on the left that he is a representative of came up with their slogan, the hashtag Patriots Pay Their Taxes. It's a great slogan. Patriots do pay their taxes. Labour has already set the pace on tackling tax avoidance and tax evasion. We launched our tax transparency and enforcement programme to force the government into action. And again, I'd like to thank Rebecca Long-Bailey for leading the Labour charge in Parliament to hold the tax dodgers to account. She's been ably backed up by a new member of our team, Peter Dowd, who's again stepped into the breach and fought in Parliament for every principle that we've put forward. And I want to congratulate Caroline Flint, who forced an amendment to the Finance Bill to ensure country-by-country reporting is now back on the agenda. The publication of the Panama Papers threw just some light on the scale of tax evasion and tax avoidance. Some of the largest firms in the City of London are up to their necks in it. HSBC alone accounted for more than 2,300 shell companies established to help the super-rich duck their taxes. In government, we will end the scourge of tax avoidance. We will end it. We will create a new tax enforcement unit at HMRC, doubling the number of staff investigating wealthy tax avoiders. We will ban tax-dodging companies from winning public sector contracts. And we'll ensure that all British Crown dependencies and overseas territories introduce a full public register of company owners and beneficiaries. We will throw light on where the tax dodgers are hiding their money. Our review of HMRC has also exposed the corporate capture of the tax system and how staff cutbacks are undermining our ability to collect the taxes we need. I want to thank PCS, the union, Professor Prem Seeker, John Christensen and their team for the expertise they provided us in drawing up this review. The next stage will be to develop the legislation and international agreements needed to close tax havens and end tax abuse. And I'll give you this assurance. When we go back into government, we'll make sure HMRC has the staffing, the resources and the legal powers to close down the tax avoidance industry that has grown up so aggressively in this country. But we have to do more than stop tax avoidance. The burden of taxation as a whole now falls too heavily on those least able to pay. So let me make it clear, in this coming period, we will be developing the policies that will shift the tax burden more fairly away from those who earn wages and salaries and onto those who hold wealth. Turning to investment, as I've said before, Labour as a party of government needs to think not just about how we spend money, but how we earn it. I've announced a £250 billion investment programme that will ensure no community is left behind. This is the scale of investment that independent experts say will start to bring Britain's infrastructure into the 21st century. It means putting the investment in place that will transform our energy system, providing cheap, low-carbon electricity. It means ensuring that every part of the country has access to super-fast broadband matching the best in the world. It means delivering the transport improvements, including HS3 in the north of England, that will unlock the potential of the whole country. But for too long now, major decisions about what and where to invest have been taken by Whitehall and the City. The result? Underinvestment and decline across the country. So it's time for our regions and localities to take control, take back control. So we will create new institutions not run by the old elite circles. Our £250 billion National Investment Bank will supply the long-term patient investment needed to sustain a new, more productive economy. It will be backed up by a network of regional development banks with a clear-cut mandate to supply finance to regional and local economies. It's a disgrace also that our small businesses can't get the finances they need to grow. Our financial system is letting them down badly at present. The new regional development banks will have a mandate to provide the patient, long-term investment they need. But we'll go further than this. We'll shake up how our major corporations work and change how our economy is owned and managed. We'll clamp down on the abuses of power at the very top. Under Labour, there'll be no more Philip Greens at all. We will legislate. We will legislate to rewrite company law to prevent them. We'll introduce legislation to ban companies taking on excessive debt to pay out dividends to shareholders. And we'll rewrite the takeover code to make sure every takeover proposal has a clear plan in place to pay workers and pensioners. We will protect their pensions. But we can do more to transform our economy for working people. Theresa May has spoken about worker representation on boards. Well, it's good to see her following our lead. But we know that when workers own and manage their companies, those businesses last longer and are more productive. If we want patient long-term investment in high-quality firms, what better way to do it than to give employees themselves a clear stake in both? So cooperation and collaboration is how the emerging economy of the future functions. So we'll look to at least double our cooperative sector in this country so that it matches those in Germany and the US. We'll build on the good example of Labour councils like Preston here in the North West, using public procurement to support cooperatives wherever they can. And yes, we'll help create 200 local energy companies and 1,000 energy cooperatives, giving power back to local communities and breaking the monopoly of the big six producers. We'll introduce a right to own, giving workers first refusal on a proposal for worker ownership when a company faces change of ownership or closure. A right to own for workers' security. So the next Labour government will promote a renaissance in cooperative and worker ownership. The new regional development banks will be tasked with supplying the capital a new generation of business owners will need to succeed. We'll support business hubs across the country. I visited Make Liverpool yesterday, where an abandoned warehouse is being turned into a shared workshop space for small businesses and the self-employed. The next Labour government will provide support to establish business hubs in every town and city. Every town and city. We know the economy is changing with more people self-employed than ever before. We need to think creatively about how to respond. So we'll be taking a serious look at how to make the welfare system better support the self-employed. But I'm also interested in the potential of a universal basic income, and I want to learn from the experiments that are taking place across Europe. But you know, until working people have proper protections at work, the labour market will always work against them. So achieve fair wages, the next Labour government will look to implement the recommendations of the Institute of Employment Relations report. We'll reintroduce sectoral collective bargaining across the economy, ending the race to the bottom. And I give you this commitment. In the first 100 days of our Labour government, we'll repeal the Trade Union Act. Because what happens when trade unions are weakened? I'll tell you what happens. Over 200,000 workers in the UK are receiving less than the minimum wage set down in law. This is totally unacceptable. Under Labour, we will properly resource HMRC and the Gangmasters and Labour Abuse Authority to make sure there are no more national scandals like Mike Ashley of Sports Direct. And our vision for a high-wage economy with everyone receiving their fair dues does not end there. I've spoken before about building on the great achievements of previous Labour governments. Yes, and one of the greatest achievements of the government elected in 1997 was the establishment of a national minimum wage, lifting millions out of poverty, and I pay tribute to that government for doing it. But remember, the Tories opposed it, claiming it would cost millions of jobs. But united in purpose, we won the argument. Under the next Labour government, everyone will earn enough to live on. When we win the next election, we will write into law a real living wage. We'll charge a new living wage review body with the task of setting it at the level needed for a decent life. Independent forecasts suggest that this will be over £10 an hour. This will be part of our new bargain in the workplace. But we know that small businesses need to be part of that bargain, and that's why we'll also be publishing proposals to help businesses implement the living wage, particularly small and medium-sized companies. We'll be examining a number of ideas, including the expansion and reform of employment allowance, to make sure that this historic step forward, improving the living standards of the poorest paid, does not impact upon hours of employment. Backed up by our commitment to investment, this means we will end the scourge of poverty pay in this country, once and for all. We've said this before, but decent pay is not just fundamentally right, it's actually good for business, it's good for employees, and it's good for Britain. But we need a new deal across the whole of our economy, because whatever we do in Britain, the old rules of the global economy are being rewritten for us. The winds of globalisation are blowing in a different direction now. They're blowing against the belief in the free market and in favour of intervention. Look at the steel crisis. With the world market flooded by cheap steel, major governments moved to protect their domestic steel industries. Ours did not, until we pushed them into it as a result of a community and trade union and Labour campaign. But they're so blinkered by their ideology that they can't see how the world is changing. Good business doesn't need no government. Good business needs good government. And the best governments today, right the way across the world, recognise that they need to support their economies, because the way the world works is changing. For decades, manufacturing jobs disappeared as producers looked for the cheapest labour they could find. Today, 1 in 6 manufacturers in the UK are bringing jobs back to Britain. That's because production today is about locating close to markets and drawing upon the highly skilled labour and high-quality investment. Digital technology means production can be smaller scale, in smaller, faster firms, dependent on cooperation and collaboration, not dog-eat-dog competition. The economies that are making best use of this shift are those with governments that understand it's taking place and support new industries and small businesses. You know, we could be part of that change here. There's huge potential in this country and in every part of the country. We have an immense heritage of scientific research and engineering expertise. Today, our science system is a world leader. We have natural resources that could make us world leaders in renewables. We have talent and ambition in every part of the country. Yet at every stage, we have a government that fails to reach that potential. It's cut scientific research spending. It's slashed subsidies to renewables, threatening tens of thousands of jobs. And it plans to cut essential public investment in transport, energy and housing across the whole country. Be certain, the next Labour government will be an interventionist government. We will not stand by like this one and see our key industries flounder and our future prosperity put at risk. Like Rebecca Long-Bailey has said, when we return to government, we'll implement a comprehensive industrial strategy developed in partnership with trade unions and employers and the wider community. After Brexit, we want to see a renaissance in British manufacturing. And as we've committed ourselves, our government will create an entrepreneurial state that works with wealth creators, the workers and the entrepreneurs, to create the products and the markets that will secure our long-term prosperity. Let me just say this in conclusion on a personal note. I'm so pleased that this conference is being held in Liverpool. I was born in this city, not far from here. My dad was a Liverpool docker and my mum was a cleaner, and then worked for 30 years behind a BHS store counter. I was part of that 1960 generation. We lived in what sociological studies have described as some of the worst slum conditions that existed within this country. We just called it home. As a result of a Labour government, I remember the day when we celebrated moving into our council house. My brother and I had a bedroom on our own for the first time, a garden front and rear. Both of us were born in NHS hospitals. Both of us had a great free education. There was an atmosphere of eternal optimism. Our generation always thought that from here on there would always be a steady improvement in people's living standards. We expected the lives of each generation would improve upon the last. But successive Tories governments put an end to that. Under Jeremy's leadership, I believe that we can restore that optimism, people's faith in the future. So I say this, in the birthplace of John Lennon, it falls to us to inspire people to imagine again. Imagine the society. Imagine the society we can create. It's a society that's radically transformed, radically fairer, more equal, more democratic, yes, based upon a prosperous economy that's economically and environmentally sustainable, but where that prosperity is shared by all. That's our vision to rebuild and transform Britain. In this party, you no longer have to whisper its name. It's called socialism. Solidarity.
Thank you, John, for that speech. Colleagues, we will be continuing the economic debate straight after lunch. We now will take the votes on the international debate. First, the annual report of the International Policy Commission. Can I see all those in favour of accepting the report? Thank you. And all those against? That's unanimous. And the International Priorities Issues document, all those to accept? Thank you. And all those against? That's unanimous. Thank you. And that concludes conference. We stand adjourned to 2:15. Thank you very much.